All right, guys, let's talk about how to lean into your edge. So, when I was younger, when I was in college in particular, I used to get into scuffles. I used to get into disagreements. I used to be somewhat aggressive, stand my ground. Um, and a lot of this came from the fact that this was just my nature. I was combative. And I mentioned before, I think part of it comes from when I was younger that I had like certain moments where I wasn't able to respond or react. And so from that, I've always made sure that I never wanted to feel like a victim ever again. And so that was like my thing, right? I was aggressive. I was a fighter. I kind of had to be, growing up, being the oldest, being the eldest, and then also kind of like lacking a father figure really does kind of force you to have to be a leader, be someone that stands up. And look, I was a little guy. I was never a big guy. Never had a growth spurt, anything of the sort. I was always very tiny, so I was kind of forced to be a specimen, right? To be something of force, and so I defended myself. And one thing I learned, unfortunately, was that um, through college indoctrination, unfortunately, was that I didn't want to be aggressive anymore. Uh, I didn't want that tension anymore. I was like, oh, I don't need this anymore. And so I kind of I shied away. I got away from my edge, which was that I was a fighter just by nature. And I paid the price. I paid the price ultimately for not um, sticking to who I really was. And what ends up happening is that you end up feeling like pretty terrible about the situation. Like I remember there was plenty of moments where I could have responded back, and because I was like, no, this is not how I want to be anymore, I would just kind of bite my tongue, to my regret, of course. And then I realized like that was what I was missing, right? I had dulled my edge, and I had gotten away from who I was. That when I finally did get back into it, it made sense, right? I was like, this is what I was trying to run away from, but then all along I realized that this is who I really was. And so I doubled down on my efforts into doing that, right? Into being who I really was, which was that I wasn't going to shy away from confrontation. It wasn't something in my nature. I'm not saying I'm a bully yet, by all means I'm not, but I'm also not afraid to speak up and to say what I want, regardless of who it is, because I've that's always been me. That's always been my thing. And so this is what I mean by leaning into your edge, right? Is that you should not run away from who you really are, because you'll pay the price. You'll pay the price because um, in those moments where I wasn't really myself, when I was trying to pretend to be something else, it was never comfortable. There was always something about that felt off. But I was performing, right? Because I thought this was what was required of me, right? Is that I needed to change, I needed to be different, things of that nature. And all along I realized like everything that I needed to be was inside of me. It was nothing outside of myself. All right, so whatever that is for you, find it, right? Find out where your edge is, right? Because where your edge is, you'll find yourself there. You'll find what you're made of in those crevices, right? In those deficits, this is where you're gonna find out who you really are. And no one can teach you that. No one can tell you that. It's not like I said. I say this all the time because I've read extensively, all right? And I can almost tell you for a fact that anything I've ever really learned, I've learned in real time, right? In real life. Sure, the books can give you a little bit of context, but the reality is the things that you learn are the things that stick with you most are the things that you learn in person. All right. I've read, like I said, I've read plenty of books, and a lot of these geeky authors, like a lot of them, like what have they done? Have they been outside? I don't know. A lot of them, I don't give them the credit that they deserve because they've just gotten it from other authors, right? The stuff that you really want to learn and take in and ingest is the things that you see in the real world, right? That you take and you learn and you're able to use for yourself. Like I said, I think for me, experience has been the best teacher. I've never read something and thought to myself, well, this is better than what I've learned in the real world, right? Because at the end of the day, that is my lived reality, right? These things that I've experienced. And so that is what the edge is, right? Is getting to the point where you push yourself to that point where everything that you feel is raw, and none of it is you don't want to take away that intensity, right? You don't want to do that, right? So if there's certain things that you're inclined to want to feel or inclined to want to do or think or say, these are all things you should do, right? This whole idea of having a filter, I think, is garbage, or constantly always being happy or things of that nature. You should want to feel all of the emotions, right? Every single thing you should want to, all right? And I think that's the one thing about being in the edge is that, or living on you, leaning into your edge, is that you understand that you need to be vulnerable as well. This isn't about being some sort of stoic, but that's for another video. Um, you should not want to shy away from who you are. Uh, it was crazy because like for the longest time I had tried to put on different sort of masks. I'm like, all right, I'm this funny guy, or I'm the talkative one, or I'm the shy one, or I'm the quiet one. And I realized like all this performance is pointless, right? I'm gonna be whatever I want to be, depending on the circumstances, depending on the day, depending on the mood, depending on many factors, right? But ultimately, it was all within the concept of that, right? Was that I was gonna lean into my edge regardless of the consequences, because I was gonna be true to who I was and to who I am. And it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. I think when you know that you're living within your nature, I think only good things can come from that. Um, and so yeah, I hope this helps. Lean into your edge. That is a lesson for today. See you in the next one.